Welcome to the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts. I'm thrilled you're here. It's great to have folks here on a beautiful spring evening. This is I believe, the 8th project that we've done in this collaboration with International Contemporary Ensemble that we call our collecting series. And the reason we call it a collecting series is because we have set up in the back these incredible archiving equipment, wonderful cameras, all sorts of sound recording devices, so that a work like this that you're going to hear tonight, a very new work, can be recorded and preserved so that performers, like when I was a young man learning cello and was interested in new music in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I wish I could have gone to a website like ICE's website and find information about the newest pieces of music with information about how those pieces were performed and how the people that first performed it and performed it so well learned to play the works as well as they do. So that's what's happening tonight, and you all are participating in that project. We're going to hear a great new exciting work performed once, then we're going to take a pause and we're going to have a conversation led by the composer and the performers about the piece, dissecting a little bit, maybe correcting things that didn't go quite as well as would have been hoped, and then we're going to hear the piece performed a second time, and all of that's going to be captured. We are so lucky here at the library to have this partnership with International Contemporary Ensemble. Are some of you ICE fans? Yeah. I'm a huge ICE fan. I'm so proud that we've been able to get such an illustrious organization to partner with us here at this library. I'm very grateful for it. And tonight, they've brought with them a wonderfully accomplished composer in Zosha de Castri. She teaches at Columbia University, but her works have been performed all over the world, and she's been commissioned by incredible organizations, orchestras, chamber groups, other noteworthy composers like John Adams. She's a treasure for New York, and we're really lucky to have her here at the library. So please help me welcome all these incredible people to our library stage.
Just another brief announcement before we start the piece. My name is Ross Carr. I'm a co-artistic director of the International Contemporary Ensemble. I'm also a percussionist. And this collecting series is our 8th concert in the collecting series, which is really exciting for us. We've focused on a different composer for each one of them, beginning 2 years ago with Anna Thorvaldsdottir. But tonight is also a part of another series that we're starting in partnership with Nokia Bell Labs. And we've started a research initiative with them to bring a few composers per year into their space in Murray Hill, New Jersey, in New Providence, in the anechoic chamber and their special surround sound spatialization labs to test different configurations and permutations of audience and performer relationships. So instead of having a simple audience and performer binary, trying to figure out what other options there are, testing those in their enhanced sort of virtual systems, and then bringing that into a concert experience. So tonight is one step in the process of that effort, and we'll also be presenting a concert this Sunday at National Sawdust in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, at 4 p.m., featuring the music of Anna Thorvaldsdottir and Seth Cluett. Both of these composers are featured in the Bell Labs process that we've undertaken, and Zosha de Castri and George Lewis will be the composers for next year. So we're tying it all together this week. If you're in town over Memorial Weekend on Sunday afternoon, please join us at National Sawdust at 4 p.m. I'm really looking forward to tonight's performance in preparation for a really great recording session tomorrow at Octavan Audio. And tonight we'll be performing La Forma dello Spazio by Zosha, and we'll talk with you about it. We'll talk with Zosha about it. Thank you so much, and I'll let Laurent take it from here. Thank you so much for that. And I think what we'll do is jump into some questions about what's motivating the piece and try and find opportunities for you all to ask questions after Zosha gives us a little bit of frame for what motivated this piece and how it came to be. And one of the interesting things about ICE, about the ensemble, is that we've played this piece a few times, but it's actually never had the same grouping of ICE musicians in it. We just did it in February in Chicago, and then 3 or 4 years ago at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and last summer at the Banff Center. And it's always different groupings of people, but I think Cory's played it the most. He probably wins the contest of who's played the piece the most. Maybe Josh. Josh and Emmy are in the back. You probably could tell that from the fact that they weren't up here. Yeah. So we'll talk about that aspect a little bit later, but yeah, maybe tell us a little bit about what made this piece come to be.
Sure, yeah. Actually, this was a good occasion to have this performance as we were preparing for the recording session, because this is sort of an older piece for me now. I guess, 8 years doesn't seem like that much time, but when you're a young composer still developing, things change quickly. So it was good to kind of go back and try to read what I was thinking about when I was writing this piece. And I guess the main ideas, I knew early on when I was starting to write the piece that I wanted to feature the violin as kind of an important soloist, at least at the beginning of the piece, so that was sort of an important bit. And I knew that I wanted to do something spatial, so to have the musicians not all on stage in the traditional sense, but have them configured. And the original premiere was for a hall about this size, so this I think is a good reaction. If it's in a very big space, that becomes a little bit harder to manage, but here I think it works well. And then I guess the other sort of point of inspiration was at that time I was looking at a lot of artwork of mobiles, so pieces like stuff by Alexander Calder or Lee Bontekoe I found really inspiring. And I thought, is there a way with music that you could do that, where you'd have sort of abstract ideas or gestures that are in some way connected. So there's an element that's static because those elements remain, but they're always kind of moving around you and you're seeing them from different perspectives and different angles. So that was something that I was kind of trying to do musically. So there's sort of these building blocks that build up that violin solo at the beginning and that eventually start moving around the concert hall, passing through the different instruments. And for me, titles always come at the very end, which maybe is strange, but I had been reading a short story by Italo Calvino, which has the same title as the piece, and I thought it was really beautiful, this idea of the form of space. And in that story, there are these three people falling through space parallel. And one person imagines if he could sort of bend space so that he could come into contact with these other people, one out of love and one out of the desire to battle. So this idea of sort of parallel streams, but also wanting to have these points of intersection. So those are sort of ideas that were floating around poetically in my mind while I was writing the piece.
And when you are designing a work like this and you're thinking of, in your mind's eye, about, say, mobiles or another translation process from visual arts to performance, how does that manifest from your vision and from the sounds you're hearing in your head to a structure, to something that becomes a piece? What's the first part of that process for you?
Well, I guess it is abstract a bit in the building at the beginning, and it becomes more and more specific as I work. I tend to work a lot on the computer. I'm also a pianist, so I kind of go back and forth between different ways of working. But playing with small blocks of sound, finding objects that I like, working with other musicians, violinist friends at the time, and then sort of building the structure out from there. So it is a little bit playful in that way, where I'm sort of moving blocks around and seeing how it could work, and then orchestrating and eventually transcribing that process for the instruments.
And I wonder, I mean, Josh Modney, our violinist, your part seems to be the central sort of locus of much of the material from the beginning. In what way do the other players performing some of the same materials that you play, how do you compare and contrast your playing to make that, to either celebrate the sameness or create difference in the part? And if we can try off mic, and if you can hear, then we'll be okay.
Yeah, it's great to hear the reflections around the space of what I'm playing. Yeah, I think it sets the tone. Like, if I finish a phrase and I hear it being reflected, then I might sink into that sound as I'm shaping the next phrase. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's like a recursive relationship.
Yeah.
Just chamber music expanded in the entire room.
Yeah, it feels, to me, that the first time that I experienced this piece, I felt like it has kind of refractive phenomena, where a source of light or sound might come from a traditional space, the center of the stage, but then those refractions bounce not only acoustically from the violin to the walls of the space, but also they get picked up and re-amplified by the surround sound, clarinet and flute. And it creates a really dynamic experience. And I wonder, from the audience's perspective, where did you find yourself focusing visually and auditorily? Is there anyone who had a specific experience that they wanted to share or ask a question about? Yes, please.
Well, I like the piece very much, but I had a hard time hearing the wind instruments when I'm sitting here. Mm-hmm. And it's, I would think, a general problem, because you got your ears pointed in this direction. Mm-hmm. This is where you're listening. And somehow, whatever's back there should be louder or have more volume or more change to draw your attention to what goes on there. Mm-hmm. I was just totally focused here. I knew I was supposed to hear them. I even turned around and looked at them. But I just had a very hard time. But it was just a beautiful, beautiful piece.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's both the compromise and I think the interest in doing spatial pieces is that, you know, every single person has a different experience of it. If you're sitting at the back, you might just be hearing mainly flute and less of the cello. And to a certain degree, that's true in any concert hall, that, you know, your position in the audience will affect how you're hearing the piece. But I think that can also be fun if you have the opportunity to hear a piece more than once and experience it in different places. But it also poses some challenges in terms of recording. What do you do in terms of recreating that experience? If the ideal listener is right in the middle of the hall, how do you make something that will still make sense in a stereo image?
But for example, if you had percussion, putting percussion there.
Put the loud guys at the back. Yeah, well, you got the full blast of it over there.
Thank you for that question. I'm wondering, what we say is that the people in the center here are in the sweet spot, which means that they're somewhat equidistant to each of the sound sources. I wonder if, from your perspective, how did that change? Were you able to hear a balance of clarinet and flute, or were they overwhelming? Sometimes they play too loud. What was your experience?
It was wonderful. Sitting in the middle, I did hear everything. My attention was directed, obviously, where I was facing, but and the bells on his ankle certainly caught my. I've never seen that before, but. But thinking of spatial, it reminded me of a John Luther Adams piece that was performed outside in the, in which I saw the composer running around and listening to it in different places. So
Right.
It's great. I mean, we can't do that in this room.
Yeah, outside isn't it?
Yeah.
I also love the piece. I'm wondering, because even just looking front ways I'm sitting here too, right next to this gentleman. The three players are spaced out quite widely on the stage, obviously, so there's already a spatial dimension. And I was just wondering, had you ever thought, or maybe that's not the way to put it, of having musicians on the side, like putting the piano in the center, even though I know the violinist, and having like the violinist there and the cello, or more 360 kind of, or would that fundamentally alter the
Yeah,
piece?
I mean, this is a fun piece to experiment with those sorts of things. There's always the issue of visibility, and especially when you have a conductor. I've had this piece played both with and without a conductor. It's very difficult to do it without. And then there's, sort of sight lines for cues, so that's partially a practical thing. The piano has to be on stage, like because you can't really wheel that out usually at most halls to the side if it's on an incline. But yeah, I mean, I've also experienced it in a very, very large hall where those musicians are much, much further away, and that becomes difficult because there's actually a physical delay between the time where the sound leaves the stage and hits their ear, and the conductor sometimes has to do very large motions, which looks a little silly when the sound is not necessarily loud, but it just out of practical consideration. Yeah.
I really enjoyed the piece. It
Oh,
was
thanks.
very lovely. Sitting in this space is actually, like you said, is really just to hear all the nuances with all the colors of the instruments is just absolutely wonderful to hear. It honestly just makes me, when I see this, it makes me think of the beginning to Mahler Symphony No. 1, where the trumpets are off stage and they come and play.
Yeah.
It's so lovely to see how simple ideas like that have evolved into something like this, and it's just absolutely magnificent to see
Oh,
that.
thanks. Yeah, sure. A lot of people think, oh, this is a new music-y thing to do spatial, but the tradition goes all the way back to Renaissance of having, antiphonal choirs on different sides of the church. So there's actually sort of a whole lineage. But yeah, it's nice that you link it to them all.
Did you have a question? Yeah, please.
Actually, a reaction. As someone sitting right in the middle, but towards the front, first of all, I love the sound of the piece, and I love the quadraphonics of it. And I actually thought that the winds were perfect because they didn't overwhelm the soloists, the three players in the front. And I respectfully disagree with the fellow in the front who about the amplifying any further the sound of the winds. I thought, for me at least, where I'm sitting, it was perfect. It muted them a bit, but it wasn't like they were playing off stage in Mahler.
Another reason for having them at the back at the very beginning of the piece, when Josh starts playing the violin, I wanted the idea of almost having the room resonate, where you don't necessarily perceive the entrance of the flute and the clarinet, that it's just kind of, there's a moment where you realize those pitches are still being sustained, that there's sort of this hum, but he's no longer playing that, so that it's subtle. And then near the middle, that's when it gets sort of more active and they play a little bit more, but that it sort of creeps up.
One more thing, though. Where would you position the clarinet and the flute in a hall, say, Zankel, or even Miller Theater?
Yeah, it's a good, I mean, sometimes balcony can work. Usually larger halls will have a center aisle, so sometimes I don't put them necessarily at the very back, but sort of somewhere in the center aisle. You have to be a little bit careful, like in a place like Miller Theater where you have a balcony. If you had them underneath, the overhang actually cuts the sound quite a bit, so for certain people it'd be nearly impossible to hear them. So you have to kind of, that's one of the challenges of this piece, is you arrive in a new space, you have to figure out the acoustics of it and quickly make a decision what makes sense and make sure that the musicians, especially the ones at the back, feel comfortable enough to play and that they can see the conductor and feel like they're together with the rest of the group.
Hi. I came back from a few months in LA where I saw a group called Kaleidoscope do several concerts. And I'm fascinated by the new pieces of young composers who are taking traditional instruments and making non-traditional sound. They also do an interesting thing. The last concert they did Shostakovich's Fifth, most exciting I've ever heard. And they have no conductor. They never use a conductor. Do you want a challenge for the second time?
I'll let the musicians decide. Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, what you can understand that they are forced to have a conductor, so it's not a desire for that piece. And that's true that we since there are so few, I mean, this is only 5 musicians. Conductors should not be there, like, if we can dream of something. But for the synchronization, it's almost impossible. Yes, really. Of course, they can play the piece without. We can try if you want. I won't work. I mean, I can see it. But I think it's quite dangerous. It's a sort of, well, and plus the fact that for a conductor, we used to be in the center of the music and to be at the best place. But in these occasions, when we do this kind of thing, we are like you. I mean, not necessarily at the good place because it's very difficult to hear everything. So you should be in the middle of the hall to control a little bit the balance. So you have to trust other persons to control it. It's quite special. And very often you have no musicians in front of you. It's still special because you want to have a relation with the musicians. So sometimes there is nobody there. They are all over the place. So that's another kind of work. But maybe we can try.
In so much music with larger ensembles, the focus is very much on blend and on a unity of sound that everyone in the audience will hear. But even with that, every audience member is having a different experience. And I love the idea of playing into that and really embracing, and it sort of goes with what Ross was talking about with the performer-audience interaction, that everyone is having a completely different experience of listening to a piece, and that we're looking for that. And that everyone who's playing it is also having a different experience, that the two back there are in a different world, and hearing the piece in an entirely different way. And I just love that lack of cohesiveness in a way. I mean, the unpredictability of that, I think that's really cool.
I think that, speaking to Laurent's point, that I guess in a way, when you're preparing a piece, it's a decision about what you would like to struggle with. Which element of the piece's preparation will provide the friction that defines the rehearsal hours that you put into it. And I think that in a case with a conductor, it's a decision to prioritize blend and style and character over the struggle against coordination. Without a conductor, then the first struggle to overcome would be coordination. So it's 2 parts efficiency and 3 parts a stylistic decision, but it's often the same way for, let's say, a piece by Yannis Xenakis, a Greek composer who wrote many pieces in surround sound, including a percussion sextet where the decision is always, are you going to do it with the click or without the click? And with the click means that you have a metronome in your ear that's synchronized across the room, and what happens is at the middle of the room, you hear this incredible synchronized phenomena. And if you don't have that, then the struggle to communicate across the 6 percussionists across the room creates its own issues and its own phenomena, which are sometimes undesirable. So that struggle is a choice, and it can create an interesting stylistic result. But I really like what we heard today. It's really special, especially the synchrony between clarinet and piano, 45 feet apart in the figure toward the end of the piece. It's really, really well done. You had some building blocks excerpts that you wanted to take a look at.
Did you have a question, Marilyn?
No, I just had a comment.
Okay.
It kind of ties in with you a little bit. So I didn't look at the program, and I wasn't paying attention. So, I mean, to the ensemble. And so at IRCAM in Paris, this sort of, very fancy electronic music place, they actually, there was a piece for a solo flute player, and the computer generated the surround sound And so actually, I thought they were taped, or I thought it was a computer answering the tones. And I was actually surprised to find out that they were people. You know, and I'm not saying
That's how perfect you are.
yeah, well, that's what, because like, it really did sound like they took over the overtones. You know, for me, it was a really nice melding of the sounds from the front to the back. But I did feel that surround sound.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting too. In going back to my notes from when I was writing the piece, I noticed I used a lot of terms from electronic music just when even though it's a purely acoustic piece, I had words like, reverb or delays, or, when that melody starts sort of getting passed around by people. So, and I do electronic music too. So I think some of that does sort of filter into instrumental writing, even if it's not with electronics, yeah.
I would love to focus on a couple
Yeah,
details
sure.
because I think it can inform the second performance we do of the piece. Since the piece is only 8 minutes long, we'll get a little inside microscopic view of some of the moments, and then
Sure.
and then we play it again. You'll have a new set of ears. So what do you recommend?
Well, a lot of the building blocks for the piece are present in the solo that Josh plays on the violin at the very beginning. So maybe we can just break down a bit. There's this sort of static drone sound that begins the piece, just like in measure 1. So with that sound, I asked him to play with a very, very slow bow, and that gives that sort of distorted, you get sort of a noisier sound in doing that, and that eventually gets sort of carried over by the instruments in the back. Then there's the very high piercing stuff that you have that immediately kind of follows that, the extreme register. Right. So again, these are things that get taken up at different parts in the piece. Then there's sort of, I had like a family, I consider them kind of families of sounds, and then I figure out how that can translate to each of the different instruments. But I was thinking of sort of distorted or a noisy family. So for instance, like when you do the bow crunch thing, how much is that? Measure 18. So each instrument has sort of different variations of something that's more noisy or distorted like that. And then there's sort of percussive or prickly type sounds, which are maybe more like the colegno battuto. So using the wood of the bow, he sort of throws it and you get something more percussive. Right, yeah. And that, I think, extends also to Cory's part, having the percussion anklet and then maybe some of the prepared piano. It's very simple. I just have him put, small objects, either like a notebook or a metronome, on certain areas of the string, and it bounces. Maybe you don't even have to play it, just give us a sense of that. Yeah, it adds just a little more ping or percussion to the sound. And then the other main idea is the melodic line, so maybe a little bit of that. The arching melody. So really, those sort of 5 ideas are the main building blocks for the piece, and he's sort of featured at the beginning. Near the end of the piece, we have everyone sort of circling around those ideas. That melody's passed around to different people, and the middle section, that's sort of the more active passing back and forth. But maybe we could just play 1 to 27 to see how those elements connect together with everybody. Is that all right for you guys? Thanks. Great, thanks.
Recording a little bit. I think
Yeah.
that tomorrow we're going to go into the studio, this lovely studio in just above the Bronx near Yonkers called Octaven. And I'm curious, since most of the listeners to the CD that will come out will be listening either on headphones or with two speakers, how do you represent these rear channels, so to speak, of clarinet and flute? And luckily enough, I think the producer is in the audience.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. So I'll just introduce, this is Martha DeFrancisco, who I'm really excited to be working with. She's a sound recording professor at McGill University who came from Montreal to join me for this project. And she's also done a lot of research on spatialized sound. So I'm counting on her expertise to help us out with this.
Now you all know why I'm sitting right here. This is the sweet spot, as we call it. The sweet spot is really the place where the front and the back are equally represented. And so I was very interested in hearing it here in this hall, because tomorrow we're going to have to reconstruct not exactly the same situation, but one that can work for listeners at home. So we will do, I believe we will do a version that is like a mixed version that is in stereo, that you can listen to in stereo at your homes or in your headphones or in your cars and so on. But also another version that will be a surround sound version that you can listen with speakers around you. So in a normal, if the violinist is playing there in the front, in a normal hall like this one, the sound that reaches your ears is not just the direct sound of his violin, but it's already a sound that is composed of reflections from everywhere. That's why the sound becomes wider than if you were in a very, very dry space, acoustically dry space. But so what we're hearing here in the middle, and so this is why we like imaging the sound from the sweet spot, is this mixed sound, your sound plus the reflections of the room. And everyone produces their own straight sound, direct sound, and reflections as well. And what we have to reconstruct in the studio tomorrow is exactly that, the effect of us hearing like mirror images because of your composition. It's not an acoustical effect, but it's what you composed for the two wind players to play in the back. And so I have a very clear idea of what we're going to do, and I hope you will hear it at some point on a CD or on a kind of publication.
Thank you, Martha.
Well, I think we'll want to hear the piece performed in its entirety again, but I'm wondering if there are any questions before we jump into that second performance, second run-through.
Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely and it's delightful, and it made me think of being in the middle of where I live. In one way, the birds are singing, and the other way, there's traffic on the street. But my question is, putting the blocks together, you identified the elements, and you mentioned blocks. What kind of order? And then you mentioned the Renaissance and how the music then. Could you just give me some insight on how you put these blocks of sound together? I'm curious.
You mean following the opening of the piece? What happens later? Or? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you put those together? What order?
I mean, some of it is planning, but a lot of it is intuitive also. Once you have these elements, to play around with different ordering, see when you overlap them, how that sounds. And that, you know, I as a pianist can play more than one line at the same time, so that's one way that's helpful. And then also the computer can kind of give you a sense of what that might sound like in advance. But do you mean that, or are you talking more about connecting it to history, to different types of music? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, globally, though, if you wanted to sort of zoom out on a larger view of the piece, In music, sometimes we label things with letters so, to understand the form. So there's the beginning, which is an A section, a B section, which is where you get the more back and forth active stuff. And then the A material, the beginning material comes back, but rather than it just being the solo, we have more of a sense of it, all the elements sort of synthesizing and coming together. And then the very end, there's sort of a coda where Cory, the pianist, has his solo, and there's sort of a slow tapering. So that's sort of the larger picture of the organization, and then the smaller levels on, you know, reorganizing those blocks in different patterns and combinations. Okay. I'm glad that's clear. Thank you.
I suggest we do it again, but I want to take a moment. If anyone's sitting on the extreme edges, if you'd like to reposition either to the other edge or find your way more to the center, please feel free to do that.
Reshuffle.
Take the time that's needed, because the different perspective it's really like standing under a Calder mobile and then going to the other side of the room and looking from a different vantage. It's a totally different piece.